Welcome to another deep dive with us. This time we'll be exploring, a connection you might not expect at first.
Yeah.
It's the link between early metallurgy and the mystical world of alchemy.
Interesting.
Yeah, we've got a whole collection of myths and rituals, symbolic interpretations, all centered around, well, those who worked with metal,
I see.
miners, smiths, anyone shaping the world around them, really.
Makes sense.
Our main guide for all this is going to be Mircea Eliade's The Forge and the Crucible. And I think you'll be surprised by what we uncover about, how ancient humans viewed their interaction with the material world, even just the materials themselves.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating about this is that we're going beyond the technical stuff, the how-to of metallurgy.
Right.
We're going deeper, like back to a time before scientific thought was, well, everything.
Yeah.
To understand how these early interactions with metal, with the process, how that shaped beliefs, even practices like alchemy.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit.
Yeah.
Eliade talks about metals being viewed as sacred, almost like...
They were living beings.
Yeah.
This whole idea of the Earth Mother is really central here.
Absolutely. The earth wasn't just a place to get stuff, it was a living being.
Right.
Ores were seen as embryos, like they were in her womb.
Wow.
And even more than that, there was this belief that ores actually grew. They matured over time, like a living thing.
Well,
Imagine thinking that a mine, after it's been emptied, could replenish itself, just given enough time.
wow. That's a completely different way of thinking about resources than we have today.
Right.
It makes me wonder if they thought ores had this whole life cycle, did that affect, I don't know, how they even approached mining?
Oh, it absolutely did. There was a sense of responsibility there, like a reverence, even when they extracted the ores. They
Mhm.
felt they were interfering with nature's rhythms, taking the ores before they were fully, ready.
So it was like harvesting a crop before it was ripe.
Exactly. And that idea of messing with time, like speeding up natural processes or changing them, that becomes a core idea in alchemy later on. That's a great transition because I was just thinking about the Smiths themselves.
Yeah.
Iliad describes them as almost, supernatural. They could do things other people couldn't.
Mm.
They were more than just craftsmen.
Right. The whole act of forging, the heat and the transformation of the metal, it was like they were mirroring creation itself.
Mm.
The Dogon people, for example, they believed that a celestial smith brought grain down from heaven.
Wow.
So yeah, they linked metallurgy to the very beginning of agriculture.
So they saw this direct connection between, like, the heavens and the forge.
Yeah.
It makes you think about, like, how important fire was to them.
Fire was everything.
Yeah.
Mastering fire, that was a way to transcend being human.
Yeah.
You're controlling this incredible force of nature capable of creation and destruction.
Right.
So it's not surprising that Siberian shamans believed incorporating iron into their bodies, metal born of fire, would enhance their spiritual power.
It's like the smith becomes a bridge between the earthly and the divine.
Yeah. And that leads us to another really important idea that Eliade explores. Sacrifice. This wasn't just about metallurgy. It was woven into how they saw creation itself.
You're talking about how in Mesopotamian myths, for instance, gods would sacrifice themselves to create the world.
Yes, that idea that new life comes from the sacrifice of existing life. And it wasn't just an idea, it was in their rituals too.
Right.
For instance, they thought the soul of a sacrificial victim could be transferred into a building during construction.
Really?
They thought it would bring the building to life.
Wow.
It shows how interconnected they saw everything: life, creation, sacrifice. It wasn't just about taking from the earth.
It was about giving back, too.
Yeah, acknowledging the cost of creation.
Which brings us back to alchemy
Mhm.
and the alchemist's ambition to, like, speed up the natural process of transforming metal. It was like they were trying to tap into that creative force.
Exactly. Eliade even quotes a 14th century alchemical text that says, "What nature cannot perfect in a vast space of time, we can achieve in a short space of time by our art."
Wow.
They saw themselves as finishing nature's work, like they were helping the universe reach its final goal.
And that goal, at least with materials, was to perfect metal, turning regular metal into gold.
Right. Because gold, to them, represented the highest state of being, like the peak of evolution, the most noble metal, pure and incorruptible, everlasting.
It's amazing how their understanding of the material world was so connected to their spirituality. They weren't just making a valuable metal, they were trying to transform themselves.
Exactly. To reach a higher state of being.
But was this whole fascination with transforming metal just a Western idea?
Oh, not at all. Both China and India had rich alchemical traditions, each with its own unique beliefs and practices.
This is getting more interesting by the minute.
I think you'll find it fascinating to see how different cultures approach the same desire, to transform matter and reach like a higher state. Before we get into that, what stands out to you so far about these early beliefs? What's really resonating with you?
It's just incredible how, like, these early cultures saw the world as so alive, so interconnected. It's such a different view from, our modern science.
It really is. But what's interesting is that even though it seems so different, there are echoes of it in how we think today.
Really? Like what?
Well, think about that concept of ores as embryos inside the Earth Mother. Eliade points out that some cultures took that even further.
Oh, yeah.
They thought that depleted minds could actually regenerate, like a womb kind of replenishing itself.
He mentions, like, miners deliberately blocking up minds that were exhausted
Right.
to allow them to regrow, like giving the Earth Mother time to rest and, I don't know, conceive new ores. It's almost like an early form of sustainability.
It is. And that connection to nature's processes goes deep. Eliade draws this fascinating parallel between metallurgy and gynecology, even obstetrics.
Wow.
Everything about mining, metalworking, it was all full of symbolism related to birth, female reproductive processes.
So it's like they saw mining as a kind of birth,
Yeah.
like a forced delivery from the Earth's womb.
Exactly. And the tools, the processes, they were all like mirrors of human reproduction. Like they were projecting their own experiences onto nature, trying to understand it, control it through those parallels.
So in a way, they didn't see a separation between themselves and nature.
Yeah.
They were part of it, participants in this, like, grand cosmic drama.
Yeah.
And all their actions, mining or forging, were reflections of that.
That's a great way to put it. It reminds me of another key element that Eliade talks about.
Yeah.
Sacrifice. Not just in metallurgy, but in creation itself.
Right.
He mentions those Mesopotamian myths where gods sacrificed themselves to bring the world into being.
And it wasn't just a myth. It was in their rituals, too. He gives that example of building rituals,
Right.
where they'd transfer the soul of a sacrificial victim into the structure.
Exactly. They thought that transfer would give the building life,
Wow.
showing how deeply connected they saw everything. Life, creation, sacrifice. It wasn't just about taking from the earth. It was about acknowledging the cost of creation, giving back in a way.
Which takes us back to alchemy.
Yeah.
And the alchemists wanting to, speed up that transformation of metal. It's like they were trying to be like nature.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Eliade quotes this 14th century alchemist. He says, "What nature cannot perfect in a vast space of time, we can achieve in a short space of time by our art." Like they were completing nature's work, helping the universe reach its goal.
And that goal, at least materially, was to perfect metal, to turn it into gold.
Right, because gold represented that highest state of being, the peak of evolution, the most noble metal, pure, incorruptible, everlasting.
It's fascinating how they saw the material world and their spiritual goals as connected.
Yeah.
They weren't just making something valuable, they were trying to transform themselves.
Exactly, to reach a higher state of being.
But was this idea of transforming metal just in the West?
Not at all. Remember we mentioned China and India.
Yes. I'm curious to hear how those cultures viewed this process.
Well, in China, alchemy was all about Taoism. Finding harmony with the natural order. Their goals weren't just about gold. It was about creating elixirs for longevity, for spiritual enlightenment.
So they were looking for immortality.
Right.
But not just physical immortality.
Right. It was about spiritual perfection, transcendence.
What about India?
In India, alchemy was tied to yoga
Oh, wow.
and the idea of liberation from this cycle of birth and death. They used alchemy to enhance their spiritual practices, to help them achieve enlightenment.
It's amazing how these different cultures were all fascinated with manipulating matter.
Yeah.
But it was really about something deeper, reaching a higher state of being.
It really speaks to a universal human desire, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To transcend our limits, to connect with something bigger than ourselves. And it makes me wonder, have we lost something with our modern science? That sense of wonder, of being connected to the world around us.
I think there's something to that. We try to explain everything with science, and maybe we've lost sight of the magic, the mystery that those earlier cultures felt.
It's like we've traded awe for, just analyzing everything. But maybe Eliade's suggesting that we can get some of that wonder back.
So how do we do that? He talks a lot about the rituals and beliefs around actually working with metal, and it seems like there might be some answers there.
He points out how much reverence people had for smiths. They weren't just workers, they were almost mystical figures. Like, they were a link between the earth and the divine.
Yeah, even the smithy itself was seen as a sacred space. It
Absolutely.
was where the raw materials were transformed, where fire and metal, came together in this like alchemical dance.
Right. And those smiths were often linked to gods or supernatural beings.
It's true.
I mean, some cultures even thought smiths were descended from gods, or that they learned their skills directly from the divine. Remember that Dogon belief?
Yeah, the celestial smith who brought grain down from heaven.
Exactly. It tied metallurgy to, like, the very start of agriculture.
Right. It shows how deeply ingrained metallurgy was in their entire view of the cosmos. And speaking of connections, what about sacrifice in their practices?
Oh, that's another fascinating thing Eliot explores. Many cultures would make sacrifices, to the furnaces or to the spirits of the metals themselves.
So it was like they were asking permission to take those metals.
Exactly. It wasn't just about taking. It was about respecting the power of nature and trying to find a balance.
Yeah, recognizing those forces and working with them, not against them. It's something we could learn from today. We kind of take the natural world for granted.
It's true. We take and take without always thinking about the consequences.
Eliot seems to be saying that by reconnecting with those old beliefs, even just in our minds, we might change how we think today.
I think that's a really important point. It's not about forgetting science, but about expanding how we see things, rediscovering that awe and that feeling of being connected to everything around us.
So what do we do now? How do we bridge the gap between our modern view and those older ways of knowing?
Maybe it starts with just being more aware, recognizing that we're not separate from nature, but part of it,
Yeah.
cultivating respect and gratitude for the natural world, and approaching technology with a bit more humility.
It's about finding that balance between progress and protecting what we have, between using nature's power and respecting its wisdom.
Beautifully put.
Ah,
It's a challenge, for
well,
sure. But it's one we have to face if we want a future that's both sustainable and fulfilling.
Well, I think we've done a pretty good job of exploring this topic. It's been complex and fascinating. We've gone from those ancient myths and rituals to the heights of alchemy and back again, all to understand how our relationship with the material world has shaped us, our beliefs and who we are.
It's been quite a journey, and I hope it's left you, the listener, with a renewed sense of wonder about the world around you and how everything's connected.
And until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep looking for those hidden connections that reveal the magic of the universe.